He saw that something had happened, and that the interview would not be a joyous one. In her presence he had no will of his own. Without knowing the grounds of her distress, he already felt the same distress unconsciously passing over him. "What is it? What?" he asked her, squeezing her hand with his elbow, and trying to read her thoughts in her face. She walked on a few steps in silence, gathering up her courage, then suddenly she stopped. "I did not tell you yesterday," she began, breathing quickly and painfully, "that coming home with Alexei Alexandrovitch I told him everything, told him I could not be his wife, and told him everything." He heard her, unconsciously bending his whole figure down to her as though hoping in this way to soften the hardness of her position for her. But directly she had said this he suddenly drew himself up, and a proud and hard expression came over his face. "Yes, yes, that's better, 1,000 times better. I know how painful it was," he said. But she was not listening to his words, she was reading his thoughts from the expression of his face. She could not guess that that expression arose from the first idea that presented itself to Vronsky, that a duel was now inevitable. The idea of a duel had never crossed her mind, and so she put a different interpretation on this passing expression of hardness. When she got her husband's letter, she knew that at the bottom of her heart that everything would go on in the old way, that she would not have the strength of will to forego her position, to abandon her son, and to join her lover. The morning spent at Princess Tverskaya's had confirmed her still more in this. But this interview was still of the utmost gravity for her. She hoped that this interview would transform her position, and save her. If on hearing this news he were to say to her resolutely, passionately, without an instant's wavering, "Throw up everything and come with me," she would give up her son and go away with him. But this news had not produced what she had expected in him. He simply seemed as though he were resenting some affront. "It was not in the least painful to me. It happened of itself," she said irritably, and she pulled her husband's letter out of her glove. I understand," he interrupted her, taking the letter, but not reading it, and trying to soothe her. "The one thing I longed for, the one thing I prayed for, was to cut short this position, so as to devote my life to your happiness." Why do you tell me that? She said. Do you suppose I can doubt it? If I doubted. Who's that coming? Said Vronsky suddenly, pointing to two ladies walking towards them. Perhaps they know us. And he hurriedly turned off, drawing her after him into a side path. Oh, I don't care. She said. Her lips were quivering. And he fancied that her eyes looked with strange fury at him from under the veil. I tell you that's not the point, I can't doubt that, but see what he writes to me. Read it. She stood still again. Again, just as at the first moment of hearing of her rupture with her husband, Vronsky, on reading the letter, was unconsciously carried away by the natural sensation aroused in him by his own relation to the betrayed husband. Now while he held his letter in his hands, he could not help picturing the challenge, which he would most likely find at home today or tomorrow, and the duel itself, in which, with the same cold and haughty expression that his face was assuming at this moment, he would await the injured husband's shot, after having himself fired into the air. And at that instant there flashed across his mind the thought of what Serpuhovskoy had just said to him, and what he had himself been thinking in the morning, that it was better not to bind himself, and he knew that this thought he could not tell her. Having read the letter, he raised his eyes to her, and there was no determination in them. She saw at once that he had been thinking about it before by himself. She knew that whatever he might say to her, he would not say all he thought. And she knew that her last hope had failed her. This was not what she had been reckoning on. You see the sort of man he is, she said, with a shaking voice, he. Forgive me, but I rejoice at it, Vronsky interrupted. For God's sake, let me finish. He added, his eyes imploring her to give him time to explain his words. I rejoice, because things cannot possibly remain as he supposes. Why can't they? Anna said, restraining her tears, and obviously attaching no sort of consequence to what he said. She felt that her fate was sealed. Vronsky meant that after the duel inevitable, he thought things could not go on as before, but he said something different. It can't go on. I hope that now you will leave him. I hope, he was confused, and redden that you will let me arrange and plan our life. Tomorrow he was beginning. She did not let him go on. But my child, she shrieked. You see what he writes. I should have to leave him, and I can't and won't do that. But, for God's sake, which is better? Leave your child, or keep up this degrading position. To whom is it degrading? To all, and most of all to you. You say degrading, don't say that. Those words have no meaning for me, she said in a shaking voice. She did not want him now to say what was untrue. She had nothing left her but his love, and she wanted to love him. Don't you understand that from the day I loved you everything has changed for me? For me there is one thing, and one thing only, your love. If that's mine, I feel so exalted, so strong, that nothing can be humiliating to me. I am proud of my position, because proud of being proud. She could not say what she was proud of. Tears of shame and despair choked her utterance. She stood still and sobbed. He felt, too, something swelling in his throat and twitching in his nose, and for the first time in his life he felt on the point of weeping. He could not have said exactly what it was touched him so. He felt sorry for her, and he felt he could not help her, and with it he knew that he was to blame for her wretchedness, and that he had done something wrong.